She was literally on the way out of her friend's house being abducted, and she was on the phone to her mom, and she said to her, "Mommy, don't answer the door to anyone and lay low." And that's when the phone cut off. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe, and if you're old here, hello again. My name is Kate Philpott and I cover true crime cases on my channel. Today's video, well, one of today's videos, which I'll explain in a sec, is a video with 4 missing person cases. I actually had planned to cover 5 in this video, but luckily I just got word this morning that one of those people has been found safe and well, which is fantastic. But these remaining cases are cases that really need more eyes on them. And I don't know what it was, but I just felt this serious sense of urgency when I was researching them, and I was like, people need to know about this now. The more eyes the better, and the sooner the better. And with me saying there'll be 2 videos today, what I mean is obviously you've got this one, which is 4 missing person cases in one, and then exactly an hour after this goes live, I'll be putting up a case updates video, because I don't know what's going on in the true crime world right now, but there have been so many major updates in some of the cases that I've covered in the last few weeks, and I was almost putting it all in the one video, but we have a full video's worth of updates, so I'm going to put that in a separate video, and it'll be up an hour after this one. So likely if you watch this right to the way through, obviously I don't know how long it's going to end up, but the chances are it's already up when you finish this video. When I say case updates, I mean there have been bodies found, there have been homicide charges thrown out left, right and center, like crazy things are happening. Also, I just want to say, as I'm filming this, I am 4 days out from the launch of my new business and brand and podcast as well. I don't know if I mentioned that on here, but as you're seeing this, it's already launched, so it would have launched on Wednesday the 19th of May. Again, it has literally nothing to do with true crime, but I just feel the need to mention it because it's a huge part of my life right now. It's literally all I've been thinking about for the last month. I'm shocked that I've been able to get these videos up, but it's basically a merging of the personal development world and the planner and journal world. And it's about empowering women to take those steps to be their best self and live their best life, which I feel really passionate about. And it would be so weird for me not to mention it because it's such a huge part of my life and a huge development in my life. If that's something you're into, I'll have links and all down below. But with all that said, quick little disclaimer before we get into these cases. Obviously, I do apologize if anything I mention is inaccurate in this video. I'm just grabbing information from the internet and merging it all into the one video. And of course, I mean absolutely no disrespect to anybody I mention in this video, particularly if there are details that are inaccurate. Alright, long intro today, but let's get into this video. So the first case we're covering today is the case of Khadijah Rose Britton. And honestly guys, I have absolutely no clue why nobody is talking about this and why I had to dig so deep just to find out about this case. It's really concerning considering the circumstances around this girl's disappearance. Khadijah Rose Britton disappeared under not just suspicious circumstances, but shocking circumstances. And I'll get into that in a second, but first a little bit about Khadijah. She was from COVELO, or COVELO, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, in Northwest California. She was Native American and in her early 20s. She was described as a star on the basketball team when she was in school. She was very sporty. She was also quite popular and very confident, and with her friends she was loyal and very protective. She would defend her friends if she needed to. And according to people who knew Khadijah, her smile lit up the entire room. Now, the night she disappeared, the 7th of February 2018, Khadijah was over at a friend's house and someone called to the door. Now, this person ended up being Khadijah's ex-boyfriend and he wanted to speak to her. So naturally, she went out to speak to him and she never came back. I can't believe that that is how it happened. But trust me, there is so much more to this. When Khadijah was reported missing a few days later, a witness came forward to say, "Oh my god, I know exactly what happened." And what had happened was her ex-boyfriend, whose name was Niji Fallis the Fourth or something like that, and was 37 by the way, caused some kind of physical altercation. And this altercation led to him chasing her around the car with a gun in his hand, by the way, and that's when he hit her and shoved her into the car. The car drove off, and nobody has heard from Khadijah since. I just got chills even saying that out loud. How does somebody disappear like that and this is still unsolved? Like, something you do need to know though is Niji was not alone. He had his new girlfriend in the car with him. She was actually driving the car, and her name was Antonia Bautista Dawson. So those are the circumstances around her disappearance, and trust me, this is only the beginning. But before we get into anything else, let's just have a look at Khadijah and Niji's relationship, because this is very, very crucial for the story. To put it simply, this guy, Niji Fallis the fourth, was an asshole. He had a criminal record. He'd been manufacturing or something. He was heavily into the drug world, and that unfortunately is kind of how Khadijah got into that world as well and got involved with that, like through his friends and everything. And their relationship was turbulent, to say the least. I mean, it's probably better described as abusive, because Niji was physically and emotionally abusive, and he had threatened her life not just one but several times. So Khadijah and Niji were on again, off again, which kind of makes sense because he was so abusive. You know, she clearly wanted to get away from him but was also too afraid of him to get away from him, which is, oh my god. And we see that in a lot of abusive relationships. And the thing was, it gets more dangerous when the victim is trying to leave, and that's exactly what Khadijah was trying to do, not so surprisingly, at the time of her disappearance. But the thing was, the more time she spent with this guy, the more her confidence just diminished and faded away, and she became afraid to get in trouble with him. Like, she would stop herself from doing certain things which were normal things because she was afraid that he would get mad at her and she would get in trouble with him. For example, she wouldn't take lifts from other men because if Niji found out about that, she would be in for a really rough time. And this, when I say other men, I mean this could literally be the father of a friend or something. Like, it didn't have to be anyone her own age at all. As you can imagine, I'm sure, he also had a history of domestic violence charges. Oh, and only 2 or 3 weeks before her disappearance, she pressed charges against him for kidnapping and assault with a deadly weapon. Do you want to know why? Because he beat her with a hammer, then he took her somewhere else, and then he beat her with the hammer again at this new location. And yeah, I mean, she was lucky enough to escape, but obviously her luck had run out because only 2 or 3 weeks later, she vanished into thin air and hasn't been seen since. So that was about 2 or 3 weeks before her disappearance, and just 1 week before her disappearance, on the 30th of January 2018, Khadijah left Niji's house at around 1 a.m. and she arrived at a relative's house absolutely hysterical, and she was bleeding and she was badly bruised and she was panicked. He had obviously beaten her again very badly. He'd pulled and dragged her around by her hair, punched her in the face, and again hit her in the head with a hammer. So she said to this relative, she said, "He's trying to kill me, he's trying to kill me." And then because there were young children in that house, she said, "Get the babies on the floor, he's gonna shoot up the house." My blood is boiling just hearing about this. So obviously I mentioned that she pressed charges. Well, on the 5th of February, she was actually due in court for a hearing. But on this day, she pretended to be asleep and she never showed up. I mean, this girl was living in so much fear, and it's not clear whether she did this out of fear alone or if she did this because she had been threatened not to show up and, you know, forced out of it. But either way, she didn't show up, and this was only 2 days before her disappearance. So let's fast forward to that day, the 7th of February 2018. On this day, Khadijah went to the authorities and she said, "I want to drop the charges." And the thing was, I can't remember who she had said this to, whether it was friends or relatives or something, but she had gone to somebody after this, or like a group of girls or something. She said, "Girls, I did it, like I dropped the charges." Like, she was proud of herself and happy about it. And it was almost like she was trying to make it known that she dropped the charges, because possibly was hoping that it would get back to Niji because she was that afraid of him. Now that's speculative, but I mean, The fact of the matter is, though, she disappeared only hours after that. Also, I feel like this is very important to mention, and sure, this may or may not be related, but I have a bad feeling about this, okay? So, around the time of Khadijah's disappearance, there was a fire burning at Niji's mother's house for 2 whole days. And when Niji's mother was asked what it was she was burning, she said it was the remains of dogs that had died. But do we believe her? Also around this time, she had been spraying her house down with a hose and also painting her house. But according to her, and I mean, sure, this makes sense, but she was just remodeling. And I mean, maybe she was just remodeling, but the timing is a little too convenient for my liking. Also, let's just look at Khadijah's disappearance from her family's perspective. As I previously mentioned, it took a few days before Khadijah was actually reported missing because everybody just assumed that she had gotten back with Niji and didn't want to tell people because obviously they'd talk her down and be like, what are you doing this for? Don't get back with him. And the general consensus was she was just trying to hide it from them in case they got mad at her. But by the time a few days passed, they were like, hang on a sec, like, has anybody heard from Khadijah? And the answer was no, nobody had. And that's when panic set in fast. Another thing they really didn't think that much into at the time, Khadijah was literally mid-abduction and she was on the phone to her mother. She was literally on the way out of her friend's house being abducted, and she was on the phone to her mom, and she said to her, "Mommy, don't answer the door to anyone and lay low." And that's when the phone cut off. Again, in hindsight, and for us on the outside looking in, if you heard something like that on the phone, obviously you'd panic a little bit, but it's just so easy for us to say that now. But if you're actually in that situation and you're just living your regular day, you just generally don't think or read too much into these things. But when nobody heard from her for a few days and that was the last thing she said to anyone, big worry. Also, excuse me, hang on a sec. What about the people in the house that Khadijah was in that night? She was at her friend's house visiting a friend. Her abusive ex-boyfriend shows up because he wants to chat. Khadijah goes out to chat to him and then just doesn't come back in. And like, nobody hears from her for days. Did they not think, oh shit, something's going on here? Again, maybe it was just that, oh, she's just getting back with him. Oh, maybe they just went to the park for a chat or whatever. I don't know. Regardless, 10 days after Khadijah's disappearance, Niji was actually arrested. Thank God. So these are the charges. First degree burglary, assault with a deadly weapon other than a firearm, threats to commit a crime resulting in death or great bodily injury, kidnapping, inflicting corporal injury on a person with whom he was in a relationship with, and attempted murder. As you can imagine, I'm sure he pleaded not guilty to all of them, and he was not cooperative at all. And oh, you're not ready for this. You're not ready for this. Okay. My blood is gonna boil and fall out of my body. In June, the county was forced to drop the felony charges of kidnapping, attempted murder, and assault with a deadly weapon because there was insufficient evidence against him. So what ended up happening was he served a short amount of time and then he was released into the community of this tiny town that all of Khadijah's family and friends lived in. I mean, can you even imagine this guy who clearly had something to do with Khadijah's disappearance was back just living in the same tiny little town as the rest of her family and friends? Like, imagine running into your loved one's murderer in the supermarket or something and they're just out free as a bird. Ooh. And I do have this tiny little voice in the back of my head saying, oh, innocent until proven guilty, you know, but I guess there was insufficient evidence against him, so, you know, no cold hard proof, but really though. Anyway, moving on. Antonia was actually arrested for felony suspicion of harboring or concealing a wanted felon. So there was that. But guess what? She also got out pretty soon as well. And I just want to mention, like, isn't it weird that there were no kidnapping charges against her? Like, even if there was insufficient evidence, and even if that's the way it went, like, they never charged her with any kidnapping related charges, and she was the one driving the car that Khadijah was allegedly kidnapped with. I do think that her relationship with Niji was probably also abusive. I mean, we see that a lot of the time with abusive boyfriends. Like, they treat all their girlfriends the same. Like, they treat them like absolute crap, abuse them, control them, manipulate them. So there is that aspect of it. So he could have made her do something that she didn't want to do, but at the end of the day, you do still have to be held accountable to some extent, right? Anyway, moving on to October 2018. Niji pleaded no contest to being a felon in possession of a firearm, but he was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Now, gonna be honest, I had to look up what pleading no contest meant because I've never actually heard that before, and it basically means you're saying the following: I do not agree and make no admissions to what I was charged with. However, I will accept the fine or punishment associated with the charge. And Antonia also pleaded no contest to being an accessory to felony, so she was then sentenced to 18 months in prison and then 18 months of probation. What is incredibly frustrating about this case, though, is honestly how little the authorities cared, particularly at the start. I'm not all that sure on now because it seems to have gone in a much better direction because the FBI is now involved. But when it started, they were basically saying, oh, she's probably just gone back to him, she's probably just hiding, and they would hardly update the family on anything. According to one family member, this honestly makes me sick. They said this. They said, when you have a viable lead, we'll come back and search. Until then, don't bother us. What the f? Also, I'm sure some of you might be thinking about Khadijah's phone. Did she have her phone on her? Like, every young adult has a phone these days, and it's always borderline connected to our bodies. So was this tracked? What was the story with that? Well, the situation with Khadijah was she was in so much fear for her life. She actually had a burner phone. She had a burner phone so that Niji couldn't track her down and so that he couldn't contact her. That is how afraid of this guy she was. But unfortunately, that also means that authorities can't track it down. One of the most heartbreaking details about this case is the fact that her father, oh my god, he got stuck in a snowstorm trying to find her. This man was waist deep in snow and he still wouldn't go back to his car because they had gotten some tip that suggested that she was close by to where he was. He refused to go back because he was like, no, I have to find her. She could be down there. He was so determined to explore this tip that he nearly got himself killed. It's just tiny insight into the pain that this family were feeling. But moving on to more recent events. That time Niji was sentenced to 4 years. Well, he actually got out early. But on the 4th of June 2020, deputies found 2 parked cars on a road in COVELO, and there'd been some kind of collision, and Niji was in the front seat of one of the cars. And at this point, he was on post-release community supervision. But as police approached the car, he started leaning towards the floor inside the vehicle. So we don't know if he was trying to hide or if he was maybe trying to reach for a gun or something. I certainly have my theories, but they ordered him to get out of the vehicle and they put him in handcuffs. And because he was on post-release community supervision, he could be searched at any time. So what they did was they searched him and they searched his vehicle, and they actually found some stuff. They found a meth glass pipe, a loaded .40 caliber handgun under the driver's seat, so that might be what he was reaching for, and a loaded rifle in the back seat. So at this point he was arrested again for 7 more charges. This guy just does not give a hoot. But look, Khadijah's family have reached out to so many people and so many Facebook pages and stuff to share her story and to get the word out there. Because for some reason that I just don't understand, nobody is talking about this. And there are a lot of fears around the potential of Khadijah's case getting totally forgotten about. But unfortunately, people are very afraid of Niji and therefore don't want to speak up. But on the other hand, you've got Khadijah's family who are afraid not to speak up in case he goes and hurts or harms somebody else. And look, at the end of the day, they deserve justice. This guy does not deserve to not be held accountable for his obvious actions. But then again, insufficient evidence. So whatever needs to happen for them to get justice, can we just do that? Can we do that? The authorities have said that someone in the Round Valley area has information, and possibly even more than one person, because Niji was the type of person to have people that he could make do his dirty work. Not that he was afraid to do it himself, evidently. That is the case of Khadijah Rose Britton. Please share the word, share her story, because I just don't know why nobody is talking about this. Alright, let's get into our next case, which is the case of Dawnita Wilkerson. Now this case, as you go through the details, just gets worse and worse. Like initially it seems like a general basic disappearance, if there is such a thing, but there is so much more to it. So Dawnita Wilkerson was an African American woman who went missing at the age of 44, although she would be 45 now. She had 6 children and most of them are grown up, but I think the youngest was about 15. She has multiple tattoos, including a heart on her lower back, praying hands with the name Timmy on her upper right shoulder, and a cross on her upper left shoulder. And she loved her kids more than anything in the world, and it would have been very, very unlikely for her to just vanish, for her to just leave. She also called her mother every single day, and also weird. Okay, this is really strange because I did my research for Dawnita Wilkerson and my research for Khadijah Rose Britton on like totally separate days, like days apart, and it's only hitting me now how many similarities there are between them, and you'll see where I'm coming from in a little bit. But that said, I am going to share her story fully separately and not constantly compare, because this is Dawnita's story and she deserves her moment too. So Dawnita was reported missing when her family realized that it had been a while since anyone had spoken to her. Like I said, she normally called her mother every single day. She hadn't been in contact with any of her children, so this was really strange. So she was reported missing on the 22nd of June 2020, but she actually went missing the day before, on the 21st of June 2020. There were a couple of family members in one house, and it was either her house or her brother's house. I've seen different things being said. She said, "I'll be right back," and she went outside, but obviously she didn't come back, and I'm guessing presumably her family didn't think much into this at first, but it didn't take long for them to become incredibly concerned. They have done a lot of media appearances. Her aunt even put together this timeline of when everybody last spoke to her. Now, sometime after Dawnita went missing, there was CCTV footage released, and it showed her getting into a car as she was leaving a motel in Evansville, Indiana. This car was a 2004 Chevy Suburban with tinted windows and a sunroof. Her phone was shut off the next morning and has never been turned back on again. Now, as well, Dawnita has several medical conditions that she needs medication for, and obviously she doesn't have her medication with her, so that's another concern. What makes this even worse is in the days leading up to Dawnita's disappearance, she was afraid for her life. She had sent the names of 2 men to family and friends, and in one source I did read that both of the men were men she had previously dated, but then in another source I saw that one of them was a man she had previously dated and another was a family member of his, so I'm not altogether sure which of those is correct, but the fact of the matter is there were 2 men that she had named to family and friends that she was afraid of, and they somehow haven't been officially identified as suspects, so their names aren't even out there in the public. And this is shocking, particularly when you hear the nature of the threatening texts that she had been getting from these men. For example, one of these texts was something along the lines of, "I'm going to get you, I'll kill you, and they'll never find your body." A friend of Dawnita's has also shared some screenshots of messages from one of them calling Dawnita horrible derogatory names and threatening her safety as well as the safety of her children. This unnamed friend also last spoke to Dawnita on the morning of Dawnita's disappearance, and Dawnita told her that she was with the 2 men and that she was, and I quote, "afraid for her life." She even called a family member as well on the morning of her disappearance and asked them if they knew anyone who had a gun. That is how afraid this woman was. And if you hadn't already guessed, The man, or at least one of these men, or whichever one she was definitely in a relationship with, had been physically abusive to Dawnita. And on top of all that, he had been put in jail not once, but 4 times over the course of 2018 and 2019 for domestic violence disputes. And Dawnita was listed as the victim. In 2018, he was convicted of knocking Dawnita to the ground and hitting her in the back of the head when she refused to take money out of her bank account for him. Dawnita had also told police about an incident regarding him choking her, and in another argument he allegedly punched her in the face and hit her in the head with a lamp. On another, oh my god, how many times can I say another? On another occasion, she'd been to hospital for injuries to her face and to her left shoulder and arm after being attacked by this man at his house for hours. He also threatened her with a knife and hit her with a perfume bottle. And during these hours of assaulting, he wouldn't let her leave, and he said that if she tried to, he would send people to hurt her children. Something else that had happened was Dawnita had filed a protective order against him, but this protective order had been dismissed because she missed the hearing for it. And I just can't help but think that there were definitely some kind of threats that led to her not showing up for this hearing. And would you believe it, there were even 3 more cases that were dismissed like this between the two for similar reasons. So they announced no contact orders. And I also had to look that up because me and legal jargon, we're not friends. So a no contact order is basically like a restraining order, but restraining orders are fully preventative to avoid any harm being done in the first place. Whereas no contact orders are when harm has already been done, but they're to prevent further harm from being done. So I mean, that just shows you how wild it is that these 2 men are not officially identified as suspects. Why protect their identity? Like, they're clearly dangerous. They could easily hurt somebody else. And if they're not in prison already, like, what about, like, protecting the community? Whoa! You know what? Can someone clarify for me what the eligibility criteria is to be officially named, identified as a suspect in a missing person case? Because it is so unsettling to know that a woman can receive multiple death threats from ex-boyfriends, tell family and friends she's afraid for her life, also tell a friend on the morning of her disappearance that she was with the 2 men that she was afraid of, have previously reported several domestic violence disputes. These men, or at least one of these men in question, has actually served time on several occasions for being violent towards her. No contact orders have been issued, and there's more, which I'll get to in a sec, and they're still not officially identified as suspects. Oh, and I haven't even mentioned yet that a few days before her disappearance, Dawnita literally said, "If anything happens to me, the unnamed man and a family member did it." And it was a few weeks before her disappearance that she actually changed her phone number, but lo and behold, this guy found out her number and was calling her. So, I mean, that's already harassment, surely. And of course, this man had run-ins with the law since 1987. 4 separate women had filed for protective orders against this man. So, would you believe I'm not even done? I'm honestly psyching myself up here because this next part is... you'll see. I'm sure at this point, you might have a lot of questions in your mind about this car that she was seen getting into on CCTV. Who was driving the car? Who owns the car? Do we know where this car is? The owner of the vehicle was one of the men she was afraid of. One of the men that she thought her life was in danger as a result of. And of course, I mean, he's not cooperating with the authorities at all. They know this is his vehicle. It's registered to him. They know it's his. But they don't know where the vehicle is. He won't tell them where it is. They don't know where it is. Although, what I will say is, according to police, based off either one or several pieces of CCTV footage, they figured out that the car with Dawnita in it travelled west through southwest Indiana and towards southern Illinois. So that's it, really. This family needs us. This is another case that nobody seems to be talking about, and I just don't understand why. Oh, this family needs us to come together, to come forward with any information about Dawnita's whereabouts, about the whereabouts of the 2004 Chevy Suburban with the tinted windows and the sunroof, because neither have been seen since the 21st of June 2020. And like, it's hard enough to hide a body, but a huge vehicle like this, like, how do you just hide that? So please, please, please spread the word about Dawnita. If you know of anybody in the Evansville, Indiana area, let them know, refresh their memory about this case. Let's not let this fall through the cracks. Let's move on to our next case. All right, this next one is yet another one with little to no coverage, and I have my theories as to why, but this woman is still missing and there is every reason to be very concerned. So it's time to share her story. This is the case of April Jean Bailey. On the evening of the 15th of January 2020, April Jean Bailey took out the bins. She took out the bins from her apartment. This is on Lynn Street in Nashua in New Hampshire. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. I've seen different pronunciations online, so whatever way it comes out, we're just gonna have to deal with it. But get this, she went out to take the bins out and she just never came back into her house. There has been absolutely no movement of money in her bank accounts. Nobody's heard from her. Like, there's been no movement whatsoever. Now, she wasn't actually reported missing until the 20th of January, which is 5 days later. And I will get to that in a moment, but apparently April was a recovering addict, and maybe that's why this has so little coverage. But from what I'm seeing, it seems that at the time of her disappearance, she was clean. She had been clean for quite a few months. But I mean, just because she had previously struggled with addiction doesn't mean that she is any less important. She's still a human being. She is one of us. Alright, so here's a little description of her. She was 5'3", had long black hair and blue eyes, was around 130 pounds at the time of her disappearance, and was in her mid to late 30s. She had a butterfly tattoo on her right shoulder and also a tattoo that says Damien on her right ankle. And when she was last seen, she was wearing black tracksuit bottoms, slippers, and a big black jacket with fur on the hood. April was also a mother of 3, and I would love to just kind of discuss the whole 5-day period where nobody really noticed she was gone yet. So let's just get into that for a sec. So like I said, unfortunately it took 5 days for April to be reported missing. So that is not ideal. And when I heard that fact, I just thought, well, what was her living situation? You know, she was a mother of 3. Did she live with her kids? Because surely they would have noticed if she went out to bring the bins out and just didn't come back. But from what I've seen, and if anyone has clearer information on this, then please leave it in the comments below. This is quite hazy, but it seems like her living situation was, you know, she had roommates. She was in either an apartment or had a room in a house, was renting a room in a house, something like that. And she had either roommates or flatmates. And these people were not related to her in any way, and that's that. That is my understanding of it, but again, it's not all that clear. But I suppose that does kind of allow for the possibility that nobody would report her missing for 5 days, because roommates, sure, some people get really close to their roommates, other people, they kind of just coexist. Like, they hardly even talk to them, they don't know their schedules, they just live in the same place. So that could kind of make sense. But then also, let's just be real here, April did have issues with addiction previously, and this may have contributed to the fact that people didn't immediately think to report her missing. People could have assumed that she'd gone back to her old crew, that she'd been using again. And that easily could have caused a delay, at least to the point where, you know, she'd been missing for 5 days and then people were like, oh wait, hold up, where's April? A big question in this case is, was she planning on going anywhere? Maybe taking the bins out was just a way to cover her tracks and then she just planned to leave. But I mean, doesn't make a whole lot of sense because she was just in tracksuit bottoms and slippers, and people don't generally go that far when they're wearing that kind of stuff. But then also you have to think, well, she did go to the trouble of putting a coat on, so maybe this means that she was planning on being out for a little bit longer than that. Now, you could counter argue that and say, well, this was New Hampshire in January, and my understanding is that would be pretty damn cold. I looked up the temperatures, and yeah, so basically we've got average temperatures of 9.7 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 12 degrees Celsius to 30.6 degrees Fahrenheit or -1 degree Celsius. So pretty damn cold. Personally, if I know my house is really warm and I need to take the bins out, even in the depths of winter, and it could be -10 degrees, I'll just bring it out. Like, I don't bother with the likes of a coat. Other people might be different. So I'm actually curious to know what you would do in that scenario. Like, say it's really, really cold outside, your house is warm, so you know that when you come back in, you can get all toasty again, but do you go and put a coat on? Like, I actually don't know what the norm is there, but personally I wouldn't. Alright, now April did have ties to Boston as well as Glens Falls, New York. But, I mean, according to family, there was absolutely not a hope in hell that she would just leave her 3 kids behind, like, without a mother. Anybody that was close to her knew that that just did not make sense. And just last month, as I'm filming this in April 2021, there was a really big search. So they had firefighters, drones, police dive teams, police canine units, all taking part in a search just off Burke Street in Nashua in relation to April Jean Bailey's disappearance. They searched a body of water at the end of Burke Street, which was next to the car park of a large abandoned building. And this was relatively close to her home on Lynn Street as well. And I don't know if there was any specific reason why this just happened last month, why there was like so much effort put into this big search in this specific location. Like, the details on that are a bit fuzzy, but according to the lieutenant, this was on their list of places to check. Unfortunately though, absolutely nothing was found, so there are still no answers here. The FBI is now on board though, and the investigation into April's disappearance has been labelled as suspicious. But as of now, that is all we know. Authorities and April's family are pleading for the public to come forward with any information they might have, no matter how seemingly insignificant. And we know that, like, it could be something that doesn't even seem related, and it could just make everything fall into place. And really, her family are very, very concerned. Her son, for example, is putting absolutely everything into trying to find his mom. He says the pain hasn't faded since she disappeared. He also said, "She's my mother. She's the greatest mother you can ask for." And he believes that there are a few people that know what happened to April. Not necessarily just one, but they're just not saying anything. And although it seems this way, I mean, April did not just vanish into thin air. Is she still out there? Maybe. Is she still alive? Maybe. But then, did something awful happen? You know, keep her in mind, especially if you are in the Nashua area in New Hampshire, if you're in the Glens Falls area of New York, or if you're anywhere in Boston. And again, let me reiterate, just because she has struggled with addiction does not diminish the value of her life. This woman is missing. Her disappearance has been labeled as suspicious. And I mean, that's just kind of how the media goes. Like, it just doesn't put any emphasis on these kind of cases because it's like, oh well, you know, they're a lost cause. No, like, these people are still human beings. So it's up to us to spread the word here, because 99.99999% of people have not even heard her name or seen her face. But that is the case of April Jean Bailey. Now, finally, let's get into our last case, and this is the case of Alicia Navarro. This case is very bizarre and very in need of attention. Alicia Navarro was 14 years old when she ran away, and I will explain the air quotes in a little bit. Alicia was 14 years old, nearly 15, when she disappeared from Glendale, Arizona. She has high-functioning autism and anxiety, to the point where, for the most part, it was very difficult for her to leave the house. She had a fear of leaving the house. She spent most of her time in her room, and she really liked her routines. You know, she didn't like change. She liked to wear the same clothes all the time. That's kind of how she functioned best and remained in control. She was also very into the online gaming world, which was the main way she made friends. And that's fine, although there had been 1 or 2 incidents that really concerned her parents. One scenario was when her mother caught her almost sending private information to someone online. Someone had asked her a question about something personal, something private, and luckily Alicia hadn't replied yet, but her mother had to step in and say, like, oh no, you know, this is like not right. And that sparked the whole internet safety, online predators kind of conversation. And Alicia said, okay, I understand, like, you don't have to worry about this anymore. And I guess it can be quite difficult as a young teenager figuring out what is right and wrong, and like it's hard enough to figure that out anyway, but when it's online, like the lines just get so blurry. Especially, I mean, this young girl wanted to make connections in the world and she found it more difficult to do in person. And then there was another incident that happened where Alicia had a conversation with someone. Her mother believes this person to have been quite a bit older than her. I don't know exactly why. I think it was based on the mature nature of the conversation, but she was that concerned about it that she actually reported it to the authorities. So it must have been pretty bad. But I mean, there was nothing they could actually do about it because, I mean, nothing had physically happened, you know? Okay, so sorry, I've gotten into a bit of a rabbit hole here, but let me get into the actual circumstances of Alicia's disappearance. So a few days before her disappearance, on the 13th of September 2019, Alicia stayed home from school because she was really struggling with anxiety that day. And then the 15th of September 2019, that's the day she disappeared. Around 1 a.m, so the night leading into the 15th, Alicia came downstairs for a glass of water and she saw that her mother was still up. And she was kind of like, oh, you're still up? What are you still doing up? And she asked her when she was going to bed. And this doesn't seem all that unusual until you realize that this was the last interaction Alicia had with her mother, and that the next morning Alicia was gone. So that next morning there was just one set of footprints through the back garden, and obviously someone, Alicia presumably, had stacked chairs so that she could hop over the fence. And that was it. She also left a note behind saying, "I ran away, I will be back, I swear. I'm sorry." And all she seemed to bring with her was her phone, her laptop, and strangely enough, a $200 comic book. Now, this was a comic book that Alicia had begged her parents for. She really, really wanted this comic book, and then when they eventually got it for her, she just didn't read it. Like, none of them saw her reading it. That's definitely an interesting fact about this case. But she also left her medication behind that she would have needed, as well as her chargers for her phone and her laptop, which she brought with her. So by the looks of it, it doesn't seem like she thought she would be gone for very long. Obviously in the note she said, "I will be back," but I mean, here we are a year and 8 months later, and she hasn't come back. But just one final note on the phone and the laptop, right? These devices had been tracked, and it seemed that once she left the house, they were never used again. Very strange, especially considering she was so into gaming and her online presence was huge. But let's just backtrack a little bit. Let's go to 5 to 6 months before her disappearance, because it was at this point that her parents were seeing a lot of changes in her. And I mean, it seemed to be for the better, you know. She finally wanted to get out and go out with friends. She seemed to kind of be coming into her own. Her music taste started to change. It changed from pop to like old school rock music like Pink Floyd. She changed her appearance. You know, she didn't want to wear like big jumpers anymore. She wanted to wear things that were more girly. At one point she even asked for a backless top, and she started to get really into makeup and body sprays and these kind of things. So she seemed to be really putting an effort into her appearance. And I mean, up to this point, she rarely even brushed her hair when she got out of bed. She'd throw on a jumper or whatever and just head to school. So could you tie this down to typical teenage behavior, like suddenly worrying about what people think of you and wanting to look your best, and you know, that inner black hole of need that we need to like impress everybody around us when we're a teenager? Possibly. Can you tell I'm speaking from experience? But then on the other hand, could this potentially be something that was more sinister? Did she have a crush on someone? Was she trying to impress someone, look her best for someone? Was she being groomed online maybe? Because of Alicia's conditions and her age, she would have been quite a bit more impressionable and vulnerable. So just leaning into what I said about her going out with friends and stuff. Now there were two guys in particular that she was friends with. One, it seemed that she had like taken a bit of a liking to, and that's fine. I mean, I've been there, and these guys were, I believe, a few years older than her maybe, but they were still minors, so we don't have their names. But there was this one day where they went to the shopping centre to just hang out. And these guys were claiming unusual things. Like, one of them told authorities that Alicia had a backpack and a burner phone the day that they went to the shopping centre, but Alicia's mother dropped her off and she was like, she didn't have anything on her. She didn't have a backpack. She didn't have a phone. Like, God forbid, a burner phone. What 14-year-old has a burner phone? Like, that's a strange thing to say. And actually, I haven't seen anything about this online, but I would really love to know if they've looked into the CCTV footage in the shopping centre. Like, it would be very easy to tell if this girl had a backpack on or not, and if she was using a burner phone or not. Well, you'd see her with a phone. So that would be an interesting thing to find out, simply because we could easily find out whether these guys were legit or not, because I'm not all that sure if we trust them or not. Like, how much do we really know about these guys? Maybe the authorities know more about them. Hopefully they do. Hopefully they've looked into them thoroughly, but then on the other hand, I'm kind of like, well, doesn't it seem a bit unlikely that 2 minors would groom this girl? Like, I don't know, maybe it's not unlikely. I don't know. I mean, let me know what you think about that. Anyway, one of these boys also told authorities that only a week before Alicia disappeared, she was kind of telling him this story about how she was running away to California. And again, like, I don't know if we trust this guy, so is this just him covering his tracks, or is this genuinely what she said? And if it is what she said, is it true? I mean, she could easily have contacts in California from gaming. So do those people know anything? Authorities have really looked into, you know, the friends that she had online, and they've done a lot of clearing of people and tried to get information from all over, but not all of these contacts could be retrieved, because, you know, sometimes with online gaming you've got like voice chats, you know, where you can literally talk back and forth with a headset or whatever, and I don't believe those kind of conversations can be tracked. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's the case. But if you just think about this whole situation from her online friends' perspectives, I mean, it could just be something like, oh yeah, I knew this girl and then she just stopped gaming. I mean, they might have just been like gaming online, talking to all these people, and Alicia is one of those people, and then all of a sudden she just stops coming online. But obviously they wouldn't think much into it because things happen. But then there could be someone out there who has some kind of information, such as like, oh, remember that girl who said that a married man was going to leave his wife for her? Yeah, I forgot about her because she stopped joining our games. Like, obviously that's a very speculative example, but it is absolutely possible, and there's a whole world of possibilities like that. And the thing is, with online gaming, location doesn't matter. She could have been friends online with people from her hometown, sure, but she also could have been friends with people from Florida or the UK or Ireland or Australia even. Literally anywhere. And that's why this case is so important to just share, and share again. Because one of those shares could get to a person that had one of those interactions with her, and that could potentially know something about where this girl is. Okay, so the whole reason I brought up people online was obviously to tell you about how important this case is to share, but also to tell you about this 20-year-old guy that Alicia was friends with on Discord, because according to him, just 11 days before Alicia's disappearance, she told him that A, she sold her Xbox, and also that she had a new boyfriend. And let me just talk about this Xbox part for a sec. I feel like if that was actually true, like, we would have known about it. Like, was her Xbox just in her room, or did she actually sell it? But let's just move over to the other thing about what this guy from Discord said. She had a new boyfriend, and this was only 11 days before she ran away. This could definitely have something to do with her disappearance. But then again, this guy also said that Alicia had the tendency to just kind of make up stories and live in this universe that she was kind of making up. So is this story true? We don't really know for sure. So the major theory in this case is all about Alicia being groomed online by some predator, because really she couldn't have gotten far on foot. She wouldn't be able to fend for herself. She had social anxiety and would have been totally panicked if she had to ask someone for help or anything. And it also took her a really long time to trust anyone. So if it is the case that she was being groomed online, this person must have put in months and months of work to actually gain her trust. But then let's bring that back to 5 or 6 months before, when all these changes started to happen and she was, you know, listening to different music, wearing different clothes, putting effort into her appearance. Maybe that's when all this started. Whatever the case may be, ultimately it is widely believed that in some way she was groomed online. She met someone online with probably bad intentions, and that this person wanted to meet up, or they moved their relationship public, or, you know, in person. Again, so many question marks. Whatever you want to believe about this case and that particular theory, the fact of the matter is, this 14-year-old vulnerable girl ran away, said she was coming back, but didn't come back. I mean, she didn't even bring her chargers with her. So my guess, and what I'm kind of leaning towards, is that she only thought she was going to be gone for a few hours, maybe a few days, max a few days, but she never came back. And she never even used her phone or her laptop after she left. At the very least though, her family expected her to come back for her birthday, which was only 5 days after she disappeared, but obviously she didn't. And there's this truly heartbreaking video of her mother singing happy birthday to her that day, 5 days after she disappeared, through tears, and it's so upsetting. I cannot imagine what that woman has gone through, and her whole family. So if Alicia Navarro is still out there, is she okay? Is she alone? Is she with someone? If she is out there and alive, is she still wanting to be with them? Does she have a choice? Is she ever planning on coming home? Or did something much worse happen? Families like this, and like the families in all of the cases I've mentioned today, really just need the public to come together and try to get some kind of information. Something Alicia's mother has done, which is absolutely amazing, is she's taken to TikTok, and she's actually built her following to, I think, nearly 260,000 at this point, which is incredible. But that needs to grow more. So if you don't already follow her on there, follow her on there. I think it's Find Alicia Navarro. When her videos do come up, make sure you watch them right through to the end, because TikTok really values that. And also make sure you're engaging with her stuff so that it pushes it out to more people. Like, we all know how powerful TikTok can be, and how a person can go from like 0 to 1 million followers overnight in some cases, and that's all about their watch time and the engagement. So engage with her posts and watch them right to the end, because sometimes a video just needs to hit that one person that doesn't know about it yet, and us watching and engaging with her content could really help that happen. Imagine that actually happened because of the online community, and then the case was solved, and either, you know, justice was served, or Alicia was brought home. Like, you know, you have to keep hope alive in these cases. And of course, if there are any updates on these cases, I will let you know on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, all of which are KatePhilpott_YT. Or if there's a bunch of case updates, I'll put it in a video like the video that's going up in an hour, which I'll talk about in a sec. But first, Patreon shout out. Our massive shout out to Ben Rosa for becoming a patron. I could say a lot about Ben, but the bottom line is Ben's a good guy. We like Ben. Oh, one sec. Ben loves Sandy, so I thought I'd get Sandy to come say a special hello. Say hi. Yeah, she's not happy. And for everyone else, don't forget to check out the Patreon. It's linked down below. Bloopers, true crime discussions, support the channel, it would mean the world to me. And don't forget, I have another video going up an hour after this one, so the chances are, because I've been filming for quite a while, but the chances are it's probably up by the time you've gotten to this point in the video. So I'll be updating you on the Suzanne Morphew case, the Colorado woman who disappeared after going on a bike ride last year on Mother's Day, Linda Stoltzfus, the 18-year-old Amish girl who disappeared on her way home from church last June, Breasia Terrell, 10-year-old girl from Davenport, Iowa, that disappeared after staying the night at offender's house, and Katie Fields, who disappeared from St. Anne's on the 10th of February this year. So lots and lots of major updates, so you definitely don't want to miss that video. I don't know how so much is happening. Regardless, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you very soon. Bye guys!